Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name's Don Arleth, and it's time for Eastern Express. This time around, we're heading straight into the geopolitical mosh pit known as the Caucasus. The region is currently witnessing a political tug-of-war of biblical proportions. Specifically, we're talking about Russia, Turkey, and Iran. Each of these big regional powers have their historical ties to the region. Each of them would like to see their influence grow and become the go-to guy for everything the South Caucasus countries need. But who's got the most pull? Let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Traditionally considered Moscow's sphere of influence, Russia's dominance in the Caucasus is now deteriorating as countries begin to lean away from the Kremlin. Russia has long exploited regional conflicts in the region, such as those in Nagorno-Karabakh and South Ossetia, to position itself as a mediator while consolidating its military and political power. Beyond direct military involvement, Russia leverages non-military tools like economic dependencies, media influence, and cultural ties to maintain control. These strategies have been particularly effective in Armenia and Georgia, where Russia has bolstered authoritarian regimes and suppressed democratic progress. In Armenia, there is a growing reluctance to rely on Russia, particularly in intelligence sharing and military matters, though economic dependence remains. The country's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has been making efforts to bring the country closer to the West. Azerbaijan, while maintaining a close political and military alignment with Russia, retains a degree of independence, limiting Moscow's leverage over Baku. In Georgia, however, Russia's influence has been amplified under the regime of oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili. Georgian population, however, is growing more vocal about their pro-Western aspirations. The recent elections, where a pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party secured victory, sparked a massive wave of protests. Almost half a year later, Georgians are still on the streets demanding their country cuts its ties with Moscow.
Now let's zone in on the east-splaining portion of our show. The Caucasus region, strategically positioned between Europe and Asia, has long been a focal point for external powers like Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Over the years, the influence of these countries has evolved, shaping the political, cultural, and economic dynamics of the area.
Historically, the Caucasus has been a contested region due to its proximity to important trade routes and its rich natural resources. In the 19th century, Russia expanded its empire into the region, gaining control over most of the area, including Armenia and Georgia, while Persia, modern-day Iran, maintained influence over parts of Azerbaijan. This led to a series of conflicts, including the Russo-Persian Wars, as both Russia and Persia sought dominance over the region. After the collapse of the Russian Empire, the Caucasus briefly experienced independence before being absorbed into the Soviet Union in the early 20th century, where it remained a crucial part of Moscow's sphere of influence. In recent years, Russia's influence in the Caucasus has remained dominant, although it is experiencing a decline. Meanwhile, Turkey, a regional power, has increased its presence in the region, particularly in Azerbaijan, due to its shared ethnic and cultural ties, as well as strategic interests. Iran, while less overtly involved, still holds sway in Azerbaijan, particularly in the south, and has strived to maintain cultural and political ties with the region's predominantly Muslim population.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Let's start with Russia, the perennial big brother who's always saying, "This is fine," as everything burns around them. Recently, relations took a nosedive, unfortunately quite literally, when an Azerbaijani passenger plane mysteriously crashed in Kazakhstan. Was it sabotage, mechanical failure, or a devious action from Russia? Whatever the cause, the crash symbolizes Moscow's increasingly strained relations with Baku, previously one of its key partners in the region. It's a reminder that Russia's grip, once ironclad, is looking more like a floppy handshake with each and every day. But hold on to your horses, because here comes Turkey, eager to fill the power vacuum and already redecorating the Caucasus with Turkish flags and pamphlets about how amazing baklava is. Turkey's role is evolving rapidly, thanks in part to Azerbaijan's victory in the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War. Ankara is using this momentum to build influence through trade, infrastructure projects, and diplomacy. President Erdogan's ambitions in the region have grown faster than he's turning people into political prisoners. Turkey isn't just doing this out of the goodness of its heart. There are strategic benefits. The South Caucasus are new crossroads for trade routes linking Europe and Asia, which means more money, more power, and potentially more headaches with Russia and Iran. Then we have Iran, which views the South Caucasus less as an opportunity and more as that noisy upstairs neighbor who constantly rearranges the furniture at 3 a.m. Tehran is worried about both Turkish and Russian meddling in what it considers its historical backyard, plus Iran's long-standing ties with Armenia clash sharply with Turkey's deepening friendship with Azerbaijan, setting up a tension that feels a bit like watching two divorced parents at a parent-teacher conference. This tension has spilled into more than just diplomatic arguments. It involves trade corridors, military posturing, and proxy groups. Iran, in particular, has been vocal about the dangers of shifting borders or altering regional balances, reminding everyone that messing with the borders in the Caucasus isn't a casual pastime, but an invitation to chaos. So what's next? The Caucasus remains a place where everyone's interests overlap awkwardly. Like a bad Venn diagram, nobody wants to acknowledge. But one thing is clear: this geopolitical battle isn't ending anytime soon, because in the Caucasus, today's fragile ally could easily be tomorrow's rival. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Marcin Krzyżanowski, Middle East expert at the Jagiellonian University. Hello, Marcin, great to see you, and thanks for joining us on Eastern Express.
Hello, it's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, now, Russia has been really busy with the war in Ukraine, but when that cools down, if that cools down, how will Russia reassert itself in the Southern Caucasus there?
Russia is trying to hold its influence over Southern Caucasus, especially over Georgia and Armenia, where its influence is still strong. But the events of Azerbaijan-Armenia war made Russia's position in Caucasus much weaker than it used to be. Russia was unable to interfere between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Russia was unable to hold its dominant position over the region and the conflict. Instead of Russia, Turkey entered the arena with, of course, still present influence of Iran. However, Russia is still a very strong player in the region and will not let its position to simply be weakened more. So in the nearest future, we will witness a lot of Russia activities in the region.
Now, I would imagine that Russia would also want to fix its kind of somewhat broken relationship with Armenia. How do you think it expects to do that?
It will be very hard for Russia to regain its position in Armenia. Russia was, from the Armenian point of view, one of the most important, if not the most important, guarantor of status quo. But the result of Azerbaijan-Armenia war simply changed the status quo, changed the equation between those two countries, and Russia was unable to help Armenians. It showed that Russia is unable to defend its allies, and Armenians are worried that in the next possible conflict with Azerbaijan, once again they will stand alone. So Russia needs to extend its guarantees in cooperation with Iran to hold its position.
And concerning Armenia and the EU integration, do you think Armenia really wants to do this to better position itself? Does it really have EU ambitions, or is this still kind of a play on Russia?
It's both, but more the play on Russia. If we look at the map, we will see that there is no direct connection between EU and Armenia. So Armenia is a landlocked country surrounded by Turkey, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and most friendly at the moment toward Armenia, Iran. The EU will face many geopolitical challenges, and if it wants to enter into Armenia more than before, and still will face a strong Russian and pro-Russian inter-Armenian opposition.
Now, how about Turkey? Turkey has damaged relations with Armenia, but it could shore those relations up, especially if there was, I guess, enough political will to engage in the foreign policy directly with them. What are your expectations for Turkey and Armenia at this point?
Turkey, from the Turkish point of view, the most important issue is to create a border connection between Turkey and Azerbaijan and further other Turkish languages countries in Central Asia, as Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. And for Armenia, it would be a huge challenge, as such a land bridge between Turkey and Azerbaijan would cut it off from the main regional ally, which at the moment is Iran. However, after the war, Turkey decided to hold up a little bit ambitions of Azerbaijan, and is trying to make the relations with Armenia better. But at the moment, Armenia is trying to balance between all regional players, such as Russia, Turkey, Iran, with the European Union behind.
Do you think that the current internal problems that Turkey is seeing, we've seen these massive protests over the arrest of the Istanbul mayor, do you think that this is going to be a problem for Erdogan to be able to engage this part of the world?
I don't think so, as the most citizens support the foreign policy of the government, and the protests are not as strong as opposition expected them to be. In my opinion, soon the internal crisis in Turkey will be over, and once more Erdogan will be able to fully focus on foreign policy issues.
Now, the 3+3 initiative, which is Iran, Turkey, and Russia, together with Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, Turkey has an interest in this. Do you think that Turkey wants to involve the EU?
From the Turkish point of view, which is kind of paradox, European Union involvement in the region is a very good thing, as it helps to counterbalance the influence of Russia, and to a lesser extent also Iran. Everything which would demean the Russian influence is helpful for Turkey, at least, of course, at the moment. And as European Union is not an aggressive political force nor military force, is no is not a challenge for Turkish influence in the region and could be helpful in fighting Russian influence.
Now, moving on to the Zangezur corridor and Nakhchivan, how will this pose a threat to Iranian influence in the region? Because now we're getting to the Iranian feature of this very complicated puzzle.
From Iranian point of view, the case is clear. For them, creation of Zangezur corridor, which would be a land connection, land bridge between Azerbaijan and Turkey, is a red line, because such corridor would cut off Iran from Armenia and further Georgia, Caucasus, and Russia, as in that area two trade routes, two corridors are crossing, east-west between Turkey and Azerbaijan and further Central Asia, and southeast from Iran through Caucasus to Russia and Europe. And Iranians threat the Zangezur corridor issue as their main point of interest, and that's one of the main reasons why Iran throws its support to Armenia against Azerbaijan.
Now, what should we look for in that part of the region? What should we look for as far as Iranian moves to thwart the project?
Iranians are trying to counterbalance Turkish and at the same time Russian influence, but with some cooperation with Russia. And Iranians are trying also to be involved in Azerbaijani issues. But at the moment, Turkey and Azerbaijan and Iran, Armenia and Russia are on two opposite sides of the barricade. Although conflict is, at least at the moment, under control, it's a cold conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there is still a risk of war. And Iran many times assure Armenians that it will not let any territorial changes to happen more than the issue above the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, which was taken by Azerbaijan during last war. That's the reason why Iran is entrenching its military presence in the area. That's the reason why Iran opened a few consulates in Armenia, also in very strategically important points, especially at the proximity of Zangezur corridor.
And finally, how will Iran keep Yerevan from getting too close to the United States, the European Union, and what about the Trump factor in all of this?
Trump factor is, at least in this case, a chaos factor, as it is very hard, if even possible, to predict future steps of the U.S. administration under President Trump. It's very hard to take it into consideration. However, the United States presence in the area is very limited. Of course, we can trace some footprints of United States influence, but still, due to the geographical and historical reasons, United States it's not major direct player in the area. However, the United States policy will surely influence the region. For example, U.S. policy led us to huge oil prices decrease, and as for example, Azerbaijan is one of the most important oil exporter in the region. It affects its policy. The same is in the case of Iran. More money for Iranian budget from oil export means more money for Iranian military apparatus.
It still, exhausts me about how complicated the dynamics of international relations are in that region. Marcin Krzyżanowski, Middle East expert, Jagiellonian University, thank you for enlightening us and sharing your knowledge. Thank you, sir.
Always at your service. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
And now we move on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. According to Ukrainian intelligence, at least 163 Chinese nationals are serving in the Russian armed forces. The discovery has raised concerns over China's involvement in the war against Ukraine, in which Beijing has previously claimed neutrality.
Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, soldiers of many different nationalities have joined the Russian army. Now it appears China is among them. A recent Ukrainian intelligence document confirms that more than 160 Chinese citizens are actively fighting on Ukrainian soil alongside Russian forces. The soldiers have been identified in various Russian military units, including the 70th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade fighting in the east of Ukraine. Recently, 2 Chinese nationals were captured in the eastern Donetsk region after a clash with Ukrainian forces. One of the captured soldiers claimed to have paid a middleman $3,000 to join Russia's military in exchange for citizenship. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the recruitment, accusing Russia of using foreign nationals, including Chinese citizens, to bolster its military effort. Beijing, while denying knowledge of the recruits, said it has opened an investigation into the claims.
A Russian diplomat en route to UNESCO conference was detained in Paris, sparking a diplomatic row. The incident, which saw the diplomat questioned and her devices seized, has heightened already mounting tensions between France and Russia.
A Russian diplomat was detained by French authorities at the Charles de Gaulle airport while traveling to a UNESCO event, with her phone and computer seized during questioning. Moscow swiftly reacted, summoning a senior French diplomat in protest. The Kremlin condemned France's actions, calling them unacceptable. Moscow's foreign ministry also sent an official protest to the French government. Paris has yet to respond publicly to the incident. This marks yet another escalation in the already tense relations between the two nations, which worsened after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Diplomatic ties have deteriorated further following French President Macron's harsh comments on Russia in March 2025.
And that's all the time we have in this edition of Eastern Express, so stay with us for more here on TVP World.